The concept of money in your bank account is, in essence, a curious illusion. This notion is not merely a metaphor or some far-fetched conspiracy theory. Imagine for a moment if every customer decided to withdraw their funds at once. The entire financial system would collapse within hours, as there simply wouldn't be enough physical currency to accommodate such a demand. This is not an anomaly but rather a fundamental characteristic of the global financial architecture we have come to accept. The practice known as fractional banking serves as the quiet engine behind worldwide debt, inflation, and the deceptive perception of wealth. Once you grasp how this mechanism operates, it becomes clear that money itself is built on promises that can never truly be fulfilled. To appreciate how we arrived at this juncture, we must journey back to an era before our lives were dictated by digital numbers on screens. In medieval Europe, currency was primarily composed of gold and silver. Wealthy individuals hoarded coins in chests or adorned themselves with precious stones for trade. However, carrying heavy bags filled with gold was fraught with danger. Consequently, people began entrusting their valuables to jewelers, individuals who possessed secure storage facilities. In exchange for these treasures, jewelers issued receipts, a simple note assuring that the bearer could return to reclaim their gold at a later date. Let's translate this into more contemporary terms because fractional banking can seem like an abstract concept, almost like smoke and mirrors. Imagine walking into a bank and depositing $100. You believe your money is securely stored in your account, waiting for you when needed. In reality, however, the bank is only required to keep a minuscule portion of that amount in reserve. Historically, this reserve ratio could have been set at 10%, meaning the bank retains $10 while lending out $90. Those lent dollars might be used by someone purchasing groceries, with the seller then depositing those $90 into another bank. That second institution would retain $9 and lend out $81. This cycle continues. Money gets deposited, relent, and so forth. By the time this process concludes, your original $100 has effectively multiplied into nearly $1,000 circulating throughout the economy. The catch lies here. Only the initial $10 exist as actual cash. Everything else is merely debt. If you find this revelation startling, brace yourself for some troubling news. What I've just outlined isn't something new at all. As of now, in the United States, reserve requirements have plummeted to 0%. Since March 2020, the Federal Reserve has mandated that banks do not need to hold any reserves, not a single dollar, against deposits taken in. This development implies that the tidy little multiplier effect no longer governs how banks extend credit. This radical shift means that banks are now empowered to operate without traditional constraints on their lending practices. They can create loans out of thin air without needing any backing from actual deposits or reserves held within their vaults. Such practices raise important questions about financial stability and economic health, since entire systems now rely on perceived value rather than tangible assets. As we navigate through these changes, it becomes increasingly crucial for individuals to understand how modern banking operates and what implications these shifts may hold for their own financial futures. The dynamics surrounding money creation are complex yet vital in comprehending today's economic landscape and potential pitfalls ahead. If banks do not require reserves, what prevents them from endlessly extending credit? The current constraints are not merely reserve requirements. Instead, they stem from capital and liquidity regulations established within a global framework known as Basel. These Basel guidelines were formulated in response to a series of financial crises, most notably the one that occurred in 2008. A collective of central bank leaders and regulatory authorities convened in Basel, Switzerland, at the Bank for International Settlements, often referred to as the Central Bank of Central Banks. These rules were not crafted by elected officials in Congress or Parliament, but rather by unelected technocrats. Here's how the system operates. Banks must demonstrate sufficient equity to absorb potential losses. Although the regulations are intricate, consider this scenario. If a bank intends to issue a risky loan amounting to $100, it might be required to maintain $8 of its own funds, shareholder equity, as a buffer against potential default. This requirement establishes a genuine limitation on lending practices. The greater the amount of high-risk assets a bank chooses to take on, the more capital it is obligated to set aside. Additionally, banks must prove that they possess enough liquid assets to weather short-term crises. These include cash reserves, government bonds, and other items that can be quickly converted into cash. Such regulations are designed to prevent banks from soaring too close to financial disaster. Notably, a significant shift has taken place. Banks no longer lend directly from deposits. Instead, they create loans that subsequently generate deposits. When you obtain a mortgage, for instance, the bank does not withdraw cash from its vaults. Rather, it credits your account with newly generated funds. These newly minted dollars exist solely because you have committed to repaying them. Following this process, the bank retrospectively assesses whether it has adequate capital reserves to cover any potential risks associated with those loans. This dynamic explains why over 90% of money circulating today is not derived from central bank money, such as physical cash or reserves, but rather consists of bank money, conjured into existence at the moment credit is extended. Reflect on this. When you observe funds in your checking account, those are not simply dollars printed by the Federal Reserve. They represent money created by banking institutions as a product of debt. This mechanism fuels the continuous expansion of the money supply as long as banks discover willing borrowers. Consequently, every financial crisis ultimately boils down to a crisis of trust. Once borrowers find themselves unable to meet their repayment obligations, or when banks struggle to refinance their debts, the entire financial ecosystem begins to unravel. Before long, the public recognized that these receipts could effectively serve as substitutes for actual gold in transactions. After all, the value represented by the receipt was just as valid and significantly more convenient to carry around. This realization marked the beginning of a clever deception. Jewelers observed an intriguing pattern. Very few clients ever demanded their gold simultaneously. Even with 100 depositors, it was likely that only 1 or 2 would attempt to retrieve their metal on any given day. Thus, most of the gold remained untouched and securely stored. This structure gives rise to 3 inevitable consequences. The first among these is inflation, a phenomenon that can destabilize economies and erode purchasing power over time. As more money enters circulation without corresponding growth in goods and services, prices tend to rise. This inflationary pressure can lead consumers and businesses alike into challenging situations where budgeting becomes increasingly difficult. Furthermore, as banks navigate this intricate web of lending and capital requirements, their approach can significantly impact economic stability. A lack of confidence among depositors or investors can trigger panic withdrawals or sell-offs in financial markets, further exacerbating an already precarious situation. In summary, while banking institutions may appear capable of unlimited lending potential due to their unique ability to create money through loans, they operate under stringent regulations intended to safeguard against systemic failure and maintain trust in the financial system. As financial institutions continually multiply the same dollars, transforming them into an ever-increasing volume of loans, the value of each dollar diminishes. This inflationary trend is not solely driven by the mechanics of supply and demand. It also stems from the very erosion of the currency itself. Moreover, we encounter a perpetual state of debt. Given that money is generated through credit, there will always be more debt in circulation than actual currency available for repayment. The presence of interest guarantees that this imbalance never resolves itself completely. Somewhere in this intricate web, someone must inevitably declare bankruptcy, refinance their obligations, or take on additional loans to stay afloat. A further complication arises from the concentration of power within this system. Financial institutions charge interest on funds that they have never actually possessed. Governments exploit this framework to finance various initiatives, including military operations and social welfare programs, without imposing direct tax increases on their citizens. Meanwhile, affluent individuals who own tangible assets like real estate, stocks, and commodities find themselves benefiting as inflation drives up asset values. In stark contrast, ordinary workers watch as their wages gradually lose purchasing power. When this complex machine breaks down, the illusion of stability shatters dramatically. Consider the Great Depression as a historical example. In 1929, banks recklessly extended credit beyond their reserves, inflating a bubble in the stock market. Once panic set in, depositors rushed to withdraw their funds. However, the cash simply was not there. As a result, thousands of banks collapsed. A similar scenario unfolded during the financial crisis of 2008. Financial institutions significantly increased lending through mortgage-backed securities, creating yet another housing bubble grounded in the same flawed principle. More promises than realities. As defaults spread throughout the economy, the entire financial system teetered on the brink of collapse once again. In response, governments and central banks intervened by injecting trillions into the economy to maintain the facade of stability. This tactic has been sustained because modern economies cannot function without it. Now let's examine the broader implications of this situation. In the United States, reserve levels are alarmingly low. Across Europe, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia, reserve requirements have either become negligible or entirely non-existent. All these regions operate under Basel regulations that are still in effect today. In contrast, developing nations such as China, India, and Brazil still enforce reserve requirements, often set at double-digit percentages, and actively utilize them to regulate credit expansion effectively. Yet even in these countries, Basel capital rules play a crucial role in determining how much risk banks can officially undertake. Regardless of your geographical location, restrictions on money creation are not merely based on deposits held in vaults. Rather, they are dictated by regulations established in Basel, Switzerland. The unsettling reality is that this financial system cannot permit individuals to remain debt-free for any significant duration. The implications are profound. As long as these systemic dynamics persist unchanged, debt will continue to play an integral role in both personal finances and broader economic frameworks worldwide. Seizing upon this insight, jewelers devised a cunning strategy. They began issuing more receipts than they actually had gold stored away. For instance, if they possessed 1,000 coins, they might distribute 2,000 receipts instead. These extra receipts could be loaned out for interest, allowing them to profit from non-existent gold reserves while everyone else remained oblivious to the scheme, so long as no one requested their coins all at once. If every household decided to settle their debts tomorrow, the monetary supply would collapse. Banks would find themselves without funds to lend, resulting in a complete halt of economic activity. The illusion of wealth is contingent upon your willingness to borrow, spend, and trust that the numbers in your bank account signify something tangible. In this sense, you serve as both the fuel and the collateral for this intricate system. This is why history plays such a pivotal role in understanding our current financial landscape. The same strategies employed by medieval jewelers to generate profit were amplified over the centuries and became the foundation of modern finance. Yet, the inherent dangers remain unchanged. The banking systems of the 19th century, the Great Depression of the 20th century, and the global financial crisis of the 21st century all serve as stark reminders that when trust erodes, everything built upon it collapses like a house of cards. Time and again, we witness a singular response. Increase the stakes, patch up the illusion, and proceed as if nothing has happened. So what conclusions can we draw from these historical episodes? Firstly, money should not be mistaken for true wealth. Genuine wealth transcends mere numbers displayed on a screen. It encompasses land, resources, skills, knowledge, and independence. These are assets that retain their value even when paper promises evaporate into thin air. Secondly, debt should not be viewed as a neutral entity. It acts as the lifeblood of a system designed primarily to benefit creditors, governments, and asset holders at your expense. Thirdly, inflation is not merely an unfortunate coincidence. It is woven into the fabric of our economic structure. Each year demands that you run faster just to stay in place. Does this imply an inevitable downfall? Not necessarily. However, it does suggest a need to reassess how you relate to money. Simply keeping cash in a bank account will not safeguard your future. Blind faith in the system will not liberate you either. Building genuine wealth, assets that can withstand inflationary cycles and debt, is your only pathway to financial independence. The lesson here isn't rooted in paranoia but rather in awareness. If your money originates as someone else's debt, your freedom hinges on how you navigate this complex machinery. History may not repeat itself verbatim but often resonates with familiar themes. The jewelers of medieval Europe, banking panics of the 19th century, and the real estate bubble of 2008 all echo similar narratives. These scenarios highlight a trick that magnifies promises beyond reality and a public willing to believe until disbelief becomes impossible. And make no mistake, this narrative is far from over. Every major financial crisis we have experienced serves as a reminder that systemic stability relies not on gold or productivity but on confidence, and confidence is notoriously fragile. As we move forward, understanding these dynamics becomes crucial for maintaining one's footing amid uncertainty. Instead of passively accepting the status quo dictated by traditional financial institutions, individuals must actively seek ways to cultivate resilience against economic fluctuations. This might involve diversifying investments or acquiring tangible assets that offer lasting value. In recognizing past patterns and embracing proactive measures today, one can better prepare for whatever challenges lie ahead, while fostering a deeper comprehension of what true wealth entails in an ever-evolving financial landscape. The next time you glance at your bank account, take a moment to reflect. A significant portion of that number is merely an illusion, created by a debt-driven system that seldom considers your personal freedom. Recognizing this deception can empower you to shield yourself from its effects. If you overlook it, however, you risk becoming just another participant in a game where the house always has the advantage. Essentially, this created money out of thin air, a phenomenon that was not merely an appealing side hustle but rather a groundbreaking transformation in how society perceived currency. The moment people began treating paper notes as equivalent to gold was when the creation of money broke free from the constraints of physical reality. From this innovative practice emerged banks that institutionalized this trickery on a grand scale. By the 17th century, even governments adopted these concepts for their own use. Understanding the intricacies of financial systems can unveil new perspectives on wealth and security. History has much to teach us, and it holds the key to navigating these complex dynamics effectively. By delving into past events and learning from them, you can uncover strategies that will help you reclaim control over your financial future. The Bank of England was established in 1694 not with the intention of serving ordinary citizens but rather to address an urgent crisis. The monarchy found itself drowning in debt due to endless wars and military campaigns. This pivotal moment set into motion a series of events that would shape modern financial systems and contribute significantly to what we now understand as economic power dynamics. As time progressed, these practices evolved further to accommodate growing populations and expanding economies. What began as a simple exchange system transformed into complex networks where credit and debt became central components of everyday life. With each passing year and every new technological advancement, our understanding and dependency on this seemingly magical concept of money deepened. Today's banking environment continues to reflect those early innovations but has also become increasingly intricate and multifaceted. The global economy thrives on trust in these financial systems. Yet beneath this veneer lies an unsettling truth about what constitutes real wealth and security in our world today. The bank extended loans to the government that far exceeded its actual reserves, all in exchange for interest payments. Rather than repaying this debt with riches acquired from new conquests, it was settled through the taxation of ordinary citizens. This scenario might sound familiar, as it mirrors a mechanism still in use by governments today, borrowing money that does not exist and subsequently taxing future generations to repay that debt. The United States has similarly followed this path. In the early days of American banking, financial institutions issued banknotes that could be exchanged for gold. However, they quickly realized they could print more notes than they had gold reserves to support them. Periodic runs on banks revealed this deceptive practice. Anxious depositors would rush in demanding their funds only to find that the money simply wasn't there. Whole banks collapsed overnight under the weight of these revelations. Yet, instead of dismantling this flawed system, governments doubled down on their efforts. They established central banks to uphold this illusion, sending a clear message. Even if real money is lacking, we will ensure the public continues to believe in its existence.